In a small provincial town, where secrets and appearances dictated the lives of its inhabitants, lived a man named Bernard Dufresne. It was a town with old-world charm, with its cobbled streets lined with family-run shops and cafes where notables liked to meet to discuss local affairs. Everyone knew everyone, and it was unthinkable to escape the curious glances or the rumors that spread like wildfire. Bernard Dufresne was an essential figure in this city. He embodied the very image of success and respectability. The boss of a successful construction company, he was able to build an empire in the space of a few decades. His buildings, his bridges, his roads, everything bore his signature. Its name was synonymous with quality and reliability, at least on the surface. He owned several properties, including a sumptuous lakeside villa, an imposing residence with royal blue shutters, surrounded by perfectly manicured gardens. His office, located in the city center, had a modern glass and steel facade, contrasting with the traditional architecture of the surrounding area. But what truly made Bernard's strength was not only his flourishing business, but his ability to forge close ties with the city's influential figures. Mayor, magistrates, local entrepreneurs, all had, at one time or another, benefited from his largesse. He knew how to flatter, offer generous investments, finance electoral campaigns or charitable events. In return, he obtained juicy contracts, discreet favors and an impeccable image in the eyes of the public. At home, he cultivated the image of a model husband and father. He was married to Sophie, a gentle and devoted woman, who had always been his silent pillar. Sophie, from a bourgeois family, had grown up with the values of discretion and loyalty. She admired Bernard, sincerely believing in his success and his honesty. Their daughter, Emily, a brilliant and ambitious young woman, was following a promising path. A graduate of a prestigious university, she had just landed a position in a large company, and Bernard took pleasure in boasting of her successes at social dinners. For him, she represented the future, tangible proof that his empire would not be in vain. In the eyes of the world, their family was perfect. A home without fuss, a resounding success. But behind this facade hid a much darker reality. Bernard Dufresne was not just a shrewd businessman. He was a man consumed by ambition, ready to do anything to maintain his power, even if it meant betraying those he claimed to love. For several years, his business had been operating on a fragile model. The public contracts he won thanks to his connections imposed tight deadlines and increasingly competitive costs. To maximize his profits, he began cutting corners on the quality of materials, hiring underpaid workers and falsifying certain official documents. What started as small infractions had turned into a well-oiled system of corruption and manipulation. As long as no one asked questions, everything was fine. And if someone dared to ask, he always found a way to silence them. But everything was about to change the day a tragic event shook the city. An apartment building, on which Bernard had worked for months, collapsed in the middle of the night. The deafening din of crashing concrete echoed for miles around. The residents of the neighborhood, awakened with a start, rushed to the scene, horrified. It took hours for firefighters and rescue workers to clear the rubble. Several bodies were found under the ruins. A young couple, barely married, who had just moved into their first apartment, as well as 2 workers who worked late on the site. The shock was immense. The whole city mourned its dead. Local media covered the affair endlessly, demanding accountability from the authorities. The preliminary investigation soon revealed disturbing irregularities. Poor quality materials, plans changed without approval, botched inspections. The first suspicions naturally turned towards the Dufresne Company. At first, Bernard was shocked, like everyone else. He played the role of the boss overwhelmed by the disaster, expressing his pain and solidarity with the families of the victims. He made generous donations to help relatives, financed funerals, and appeared to the mayor promising to cooperate fully with the investigation. But behind this facade, he felt the noose tightening. He knew that if the truth came out, he would not escape unscathed. The days passed, and the investigation progressed quickly. Incriminating documents began to emerge. Workers began to speak in whispers about questionable practices. Some engineers refused to cover up the irregularities observed on the site. An expert commissioned by the authorities concludes that the collapse was due to non-compliance with safety standards and underqualified materials. Bernard then understood that if he did not quickly take matters into his own hands, his empire would collapse along with the building. He used his power, money, and connections to cover up the truth. He put pressure on certain witnesses, bribed workers, engineers, and even municipal officials. He made compromising reports disappear and others falsified. He hired the best lawyers to craft an unassailable defense. Each piece of the puzzle was carefully manipulated to deflect suspicion away from him. And it worked. With each maneuver, he felt more invincible. The press began to raise other hypotheses: a design flaw, an act of sabotage, poor workmanship dating from before his intervention. The jurors already seemed influenced. The affair was taking a favorable turn. But Bernard had underestimated one crucial element: his own family. Sophie, although she still loved her husband, felt that her years of doubt and unease were piling up like an unbearable weight. She had lived in the shadow of his strange behavior, these discreet changes in his habits, his inexplicable silences, his secret calls, but she had never dared to dig deeper. She had convinced herself that it was all linked to the stress of work, to the pressure he was under in his company. But with Emily's tragic death, everything she had ignored, everything she had put aside in the hope that it would pass, shattered like broken glass. The loss of Emily was already a devastating blow, but the weight of the secret she had left behind, a secret that Sophie could no longer ignore, was eating away at her. Emily, with her wisdom and sharp mind, had seen through appearances long before Sophie became aware of it. For some time, the young girl had observed her father, the small inconsistencies in his speeches, the changes in his associates, and that cold shiver of guilt that she perceived in him when he thought he was alone. One evening before her tragic death, Emily resolved to confront the truth. She knew her father had been involved in shady dealings with corrupt officials, secret deals with crooked companies, frightening debts that he had covered with manipulation and bribery. But she also knew that without evidence, nothing could ever change.
So, like a detective, she slipped into the shadows, observing and listening.
The emails she had intercepted, the photos she had taken, the recordings she had hidden were now her truth. When Emily entered the living room that evening, the heavy silence seemed to swallow up all light. Sophie didn't know if it was her own heart that was beating so hard or if the air around her had become heavier. The daughter she had raised, the one she had protected from all harm, was now the instrument of a truth that would tear her family apart. "Mom, Dad, I can't let this happen anymore," said Emily, in a calm but determined voice, as if she knew that the time had come to say everything. She held the file up in front of them, her hands firm but full of deep sadness. I have the proof. He corrupted witnesses. He falsified documents to cover up his mistakes. And he had innocent people killed for his profit.
The truth must come out.
Bernard, who was standing near the fireplace, turned pale instantly. His eyes, once full of security and manipulation, betrayed a panic he couldn't hide. It was the moment he had feared, the one he knew was inevitable. He turned to his daughter, trying to regain some control, but the terror in her eyes betrayed him. "You don't know what you're saying, Emily." His voice trembled as he searched for words.
It's not what you think. You don't understand everything.
I did it for us, for you, for this family. If I didn't do this, we would all be ruined. You owe me too. But Emily's small voice, calm and implacable, cut through the air with icy clarity. I know exactly what you did, Dad.
Andy won't let you run away.
What you did is priceless, but it's time you pay the consequences. Sophie, devastated, felt herself wobbling on her legs. The life she had known, the memories of a united family, were crumbling before her eyes. Her daughter's truth, as terrible as it was, finally shed light on the darkness she had always perceived without being able to explain it. Her hands shook as she observed the irrefutable evidence, the photos, the recordings, the secret exchanges that Emily had collected. Every detail referred to a world she had never wanted to see, but which was now inevitably her reality. Her husband was no longer the man she thought he was. Bernard, cornered by the truth, made an impulsive gesture, rushing towards his daughter, trying to snatch the evidence from her hands as if he could erase it in an instant. But Sophie, stronger than ever, stood up. She felt her entire body tremble with fear, but also with rage. She was no longer the weak woman, blinded by love and trust. No, she was a mother, a woman who could no longer ignore the truth. "No, Bernard," she said in a broken but firm voice. "You will be held accountable. What you have done can no longer remain hidden. I always forgave you, but not this time. Not what you did to our daughter." Sophie's words echoed in the heavy air, and for the first time, Bernard felt the pressure of the truth overwhelm him. He no longer had a way to escape. The confrontation between Bernard and his family was of icy intensity. For a moment, he didn't know how to react, his anger colliding with the deep pain of the impending loss of his authority. There he found himself, facing Sophie, the woman he had married in the hope that his love for her would be a shield against his own demons, and Emily, his own daughter, the one he had once seen as an extension of his ambitions, an ally of his power. But he no longer had room for illusion. The truth, raw and incontestable, had struck him like lightning, destroying everything in its path. His dreams of immunity, his certainty that he could always manipulate events to his advantage, were now reduced to nothing. Bernard slowly turned towards Sophie, an expression of agony marking his face. He no longer had the confidence he once displayed, the implacable man who knew how to bend the world to his will. He was nothing more than a broken man, whose mask of power was finally falling. His lips trembled, and his gaze, usually filled with cold determination, was now tinged with despair. He tried to grab Sophie's hand, as if a simple gesture could restore balance to their relationship, but he knew deep down that it was too late.
"Sophie, please." His voice was almost a whisper, a desperate plea, a silent cry for the last chance of an impossible redemption.
But Sophie, her head held high, her gaze filled with suppressed rage, turned away. She could no longer, after everything she had discovered, continue to live in this illusion. She was no longer the woman who would be blinded by blind love or a marital duty that no longer had meaning. It was Emily's mother, the one who had discovered the truth about her husband, and she now knew that any form of continuity was inconceivable. Her world had fallen apart, and the only respect she had left was for herself. The next day, the affair broke out in the media with unprecedented force. The evidence was there, more solid than anything Bernard could have imagined. The recordings, the documents, the photos, the whole puzzle that Emily had painstakingly pieced together was revealed. The scandal tore Bernard's image to shreds. He was arrested in the morning, and his name, once respected in some influential circles, was now smeared and associated with corruption, murder and the exploitation of innocent people. Information multiplied on the fraudulent transactions, political complicity and suspicious deaths for which Bernard was responsible. The extent of the decline of the man he had been was now far greater than he had ever feared. For Sophie, the following days were filled with dull pain. The weight of humiliation was unbearable, but the need to break free was even greater. She couldn't stand by this man, even if, in a part of her, she still loved him, even if her memories of a bygone time came back to haunt her. But dignity demanded that she separate from him. It wasn't revenge that made her make this decision. It was the pure necessity of preserving his honor, of cutting the cord with a past filled with lies. Their marriage, once founded on ideals of love and family, shattered under the weight of the injustice it contained. She signed the divorce papers, not without suffering, but with the conviction that it was the only way to assert herself again. Emily, for her part, faced a torrent of contradictory emotions. Although she was hailed as a hero, the truth coming out thanks to her courage and her spirit of justice, a part of her remained broken. She had lost her father, the man she had always respected, the man she had long believed represented everything she wanted to become. The memory of the man to whom she had devoted her admiration crumbled as the reality of his actions came to light. The father she had loved was only a mirage, a being consumed by his own weaknesses and his need to ascend. But Emily knew that her mission was right. She had acted for the truth, for the future, for a justice that transcends family and blood ties. The outrage she felt was not just directed at Bernard, but also at the system he had manipulated, at the years of corruption he had supported. She had sacrificed her own inner peace so that the world would know what really happened. And even though the pain persisted, she knew that justice, although slow and sometimes difficult to grasp, had triumphed. Thus, in this saga of betrayals and revelations, the world had seen the truth come to light. The price was high, but Emily's determination was that of a young woman who understood that the fight for the truth, as devastating as it was the only thing that could still bring meaning to this debacle.